I had taken my time to set up my hunting camp on early October in preparation for deer season. On October 4th, 2017, I had heard a strange howling outside of my trailer. It sounded like a wolf howl, except much larger. I thought it might be from a larger alpha male, so I looked out the window out of curiosity, and what I saw truly scared me. It looked to me like a large coyote walking around on two legs, baring its teeth as it walked and paced around the trailer. Then, it did something that made my blood run cold. It quickly jumped into the woodline where I could not see it. Puzzled and afraid, I quickly looked around to see where it had gone, and not even a split second later, it charged out of the woods and smacked right into the travel trailer. It knocked me off my bench, and I fell back, dazed. This thing possessed superhuman strength and nearly toppled over my trailer. I felt like a semi-truck ran into us. I jumped up to grab my gun, but the only thing I had near me was my loaded 12 gauge, and it was ready to go. I picked it up, cocked it, and I was ready to go all Arnold Schwarzenegger on this thing. I kicked the door open, and I had the shotgun up on my shoulder, ready to fire. I didn't see it anywhere. The woods around me were silent. It was eerie. It was like being in a horror movie where you know something bad is about to happen. I slowly scanned my surroundings and crept around the trailer to see if I can find it. I was gonna fill it full of slugs. I made it all the way around the trailer, 360 degrees, scanning every nook and cranny, but I never saw anything. Nothing. No tracks, no eye shine. The spot that it impacted right where I was looking out the window, there was nothing. No footprints, no dents in the trailer even, and even though it felt like I got hit by a car. But this awful stench lingered in the air. It smelled like blood and rotting meat. And that's when I started to question if I'm just hallucinating or I'm going crazy. And that's when I heard this nasty, god-awful howl, growl, scream that came from close by in the woods. I ran back in the trailer and decided I would just be better off holding up in there. And if this thing decided to break in, it's going to meet its end with a couple of slug shells. Safe to say I didn't sleep that night, and I promptly moved to a different area the very next morning. I was only 15 years old at the time. I'm 27 now. At the time, I was going to high school like any other normal teenager, and back beyond our house was this huge area that was fenced off. The fencing was tall, wooden fences, and I believe the neighbor or someone or something owned it, but to my knowledge, it was just an empty field. Beyond that was woods, and then I think it went to another neighborhood a ways after that. This fence went right up against my backyard, and then paralleled the entire sidewalk all the way down a couple of blocks. On the other side of this fence was this giant field that we would sometimes hop to get across the neighborhood, and then on the other side of that field was a totally different neighborhood. If you hopped the fence to the left, you would be in the woods. In front of you would be the next neighborhood, and to the right of you would be our neighborhood. My friends and I only hopped this fence a couple of times, but there was really nothing back there. It did look shady though, like I'm sure people bought drugs back there or did heroin. I did actually see some trash and a homeless person's tent back there once. Who knows? But this was in the wintertime, and every morning when my father would drive me and my sister to school, we would hear these horrible noises and screams that sounded like they were on the other side of the fence. My sister and I would always hear it, and it creeped her and I out. My dad was in denial about it, but it was clear as day, and it was every winter morning. It was loud, and I was not the only one in the neighborhood to hear it. It wasn't until around my senior year of high school that I befriended one of the neighbors on the far side of our neighborhood, who also just happened to be a registered hunter. One day, we got on the topic somehow of the noise I had heard a few years back, and he confirmed that there was indeed a strange creature that he had seen living back there, and that I was not crazy. He said this thing was tall, black, had pointy ears, and resembled a wolf. It nearly tried to break down the fence and get into his house until he fired a couple shots a few years ago. He hasn't seen much of it in the last year, but it still comes around from time to time. He believes whatever this animal was migrates through the area through the wintertime. There's times that he has heard scratching on the fence, like somebody pressing and dragging a bunch of knives onto the fence board early in the morning, the same time in the morning that I had heard the howls years ago. It's very strange. After I graduated, I moved off to college and moved the heck out of Dodge, and now live states away with a new life, new career, and new girlfriend. Luckily, I don't have to deal with any of that now. My wife and I just this last fall were on our way, driving up to British Columbia from Oklahoma and our small motorhome. We were making our way along the highway at nighttime when a large black dog stepped out and crossed the road quickly. This large dog was walking erect on two legs, and I would estimate the height at over 8 to 9 feet tall. It had very thick fur and had tall pointed ears. Because of the darkness, it was hard to get a total estimation of its features, but it did have amber glowing eyes that seemed to glow unnaturally. When your headlights hit an animal and they have that eye glow, this animal had that, but without even having any headlights in its eyes. It quickly crossed the road and then looked over at us mid-stride. Then it was gone, across to the other side of the road. It happened so fast and so close, I was afraid we were going to hit it. There was no other traffic present at this time, and no really spot to pull over. It scared my wife more than it scared me, but I still get the chills just thinking about it and describing it to you. It was 1999, and I was driving east of Charleston, Missouri. I was driving later on at night, and I had pulled over to put some water in my coolant tank. Quick note, I had been having some serious issues with that truck that I was driving at the time because it was overheating. For whatever reason, I had neglected to get the proper coolant for it, so I would literally be carrying around jugs of water with me and stopping every 10 or so miles to be pouring it in there just to keep the engine from overheating. Dumb, I know. So this was one of my routine pullovers to the side of the road to quickly put some water into the coolant. My engine was really hot, so I think I was trying to let my truck cool down because it was starting to get really hot, and the engine was nearing smoking. I lifted up the hood and poured in the water, and sat there and waited. I thought that while I'd give the engine a minute to cool down, I would take this opportune moment to have a cigarette break. As I'm lighting my cigarette, I hear this high-pitched, long, drawn-out echoing sound. Then I begin to make it out as a howl of some sort. This makes my skin crawl, and I begin to feel on edge. I try to brush it off and finish my cigarette, but this eerie feeling crept over me. Out of the corner of my eye, as my eyes began adjusting to the darkness, I can make out the outline of a figure standing upright across the road, just beyond the trees a bit. It was very tall, taller than me, I'm sure. As I can make out the outline more and more, it resembled that of a dog, or so I thought, but the ears were very long and pointed, and the body seemed very broad, like a bodybuilder. It began moving and swaying side to side, as if trying to get a better look at me. That's the vibe I got. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I was seriously getting creeped out. I remember thinking, well, that's enough for me. I threw my cigarette down, stomped on it, closed my hood, and jumped back in my truck. I wasn't going to wait around another second. I got out of there and just got to a nearby gas station and finally bought some coolant. I don't know what kind of animal I was dealing with that night, or why I felt those feelings, but I do know that because of that situation, it's taught me to really be prepared. In my case, it means not being neglectful and making sure your vehicle has plenty of coolant, which I stocked up on, and quit being lazy about. A few years ago, I went out with a couple of my buddies to do some bass fishing at night. I'm not going to tell you where, because I don't want anybody to listen to this and to think they're brave and to go try and find this thing. Nobody should try and find what we saw. It needs to be left and forgotten about. What we saw came straight out of a nightmare. When we were fishing, we began hearing a loud crashing sound coming off far to the left of the woods, when my friend shined the spotlight right in the spot that we heard the noise coming from. And lo and behold, this monstrosity is standing there. A creature with the height of around 8 feet tall and covered in dark brown to black hair at the very edge of the tree line, fully lit up by the spotlight. It had its large hand on the side of the tree and was watching us menacingly. This thing looked like a flipping werewolf out of the movie The Howling. It looked evil. It gave us a scowl, or at least that's what the expression on its face resembled. Then it stepped out of the tree line and began walking towards us. My friend, who was already screaming and panicking after seeing it when he shined the light on it, was now screaming and running, leaving behind everything, as we were all leaving our equipment behind. The creature behind us started to pick up the pace and began grunting and letting out a panting noise, as if to let us know it was giving chase. We made it back to the main trail and then back to our truck in one piece, and it seemed that this creature had stopped following us somewhere along the way. We were terrified. One of us had to go back the following morning to retrieve our equipment, which was left untouched. Still, one of the scariest things I've ever been through in my life. We bought our place about 5 years ago on the river here in Franklin County, Missouri. Things happen on a daily basis, like howls, tree knocks, and something looming in our woods. Our son used to travel home late at night on his electric bike, 2.5 miles from town to home here. He stopped traveling at night, around 3 a.m., after something that was 7 feet tall, white and hairy, crossed a field next to the road and was gone. It terrified him so much that he moved into town permanently and will not live out here. Myself and my husband heard strange howl calls. I hear tree knocks on our back land and smell a horrible wet dog smell sometimes coming off of the hill. I do not trail walk our land anymore, nor do I go out after dark. I have had chickens disappear from a locked coop and 2 peacocks killed inside a locked 10-foot by 10-foot cage. The 200 acres down the road is where my son seen the one head towards. As a minister, I was hesitant to write this, but feel something is out here and in a group. I believe an investigation should be done. My guard dog refuses to be out in the backland, as if it is frightened by something. I won't even swim in our pool alone. I feel watched, and a few times seen something tall in the woods, but could not get the nerve to get closer, as we have found deer legs and parts that should not have been killed, as we did not hunt our forest animals. Today, I heard tree knocks again, and when I stepped out to feed the barn cats, nope, I came back in. It creeps me out. I almost want to sell our place, but it's so beautiful out here. The bluff off the backland is a 100-foot bluff above the river. Lots of open spaced land in a deep hollow that is remote and thousands of acres around. Thank you for listening. I want to start off by saying I don't know what I saw. I know it wasn't a bear. Having said that, I don't know what to think. So this last Saturday, at about 12:30, my hunting partner and I went to a cave conservation area to scout and see what conservation has cleared. We crossed a creek bottom to where there are small food plots. Once we crossed to the other side of the field, we saw something on the trail, about 200 yards off. Even from that distance, I could see that it was big. I noted a head by a limb that I judged was maybe 5 or 6 feet off the ground. What we saw then crouched and sort of swayed a few times before taking off to the right and stopping. Not being sure what we saw, we crossed into the next field and discussed what it was. We turned around and went back to the field we had seen the creature, and it was gone. We crossed back to where it had been and found a large, fresh footprint. I put my foot down next to the print. I wear a size 10.5, and the print is way bigger than my foot. We estimate it to be 16 or 18 inches long. In that same area, we found broken trees that had been pulled up and then wove between other trees. What does that? Also, the limb we thought was maybe 5 or 6 feet off the ground was more like 8 feet 9, maybe. What we saw was big, and when it moved, it almost glided. It was dark gray with brown hair. It was bipedal. I couldn't make out any facial features or say 100% what it was. We were too far away. This past October, I was walking along a road by City Lake Park in Sullivan, Missouri. It was around 11:20 p.m. on a Thursday night, and the park is remote and empty on a night like that. I'm 29 and stand 6'6". My vision is 15-20 in my left eye, better than normal. As I came around the curb, I had the National Preserve State Park to my right. As I looked ahead some 70 to 100 feet, and I saw this tall monkey with long legs go by under one of the lights. I immediately looked to my right at the tree line as fear overwhelmed my body. I turned around, pacing myself back towards town, trying to make sense of what I saw. It stood about 7 feet, and it was hairy. The hair of the arms was hanging about 3 to 4 inches. It was the only part of the silhouette that was clearly hairy, and I could notice clearly that it had ape-like hairy arms. I went back to the house and researched on the subject on YouTube, but most of the videos showed a much heavier set creature. A lot of people that I talked to just cannot believe me. Last night, I came across the Jacobs video, and the similarity struck me. I know that it is hard to believe what I saw, and I myself was a skeptic of this phenomenon until it happened to me. Now I know that the creature and cause exists. Do we know why it is so elusive? It seems that it was leaving the park when it saw me. Why would a creature so large be scared of a human? I have no intention to gain any benefit from my experience. The sighting occurred sometime after dark. I was in my sleeping bag, sleeping on a sandbar with 3 other guys on the river after an afternoon of canoeing and fishing. I was awakened and was looking upstream into a beautiful bright full moon. The light being given off was so bright that you could read by the moonlight alone. Suddenly, about 20 yards upstream to my left, a very large, very massive creature walking on 2 legs stepped into the river to cross. It appeared to have a very massive upper body. Because of the moonlight and angle, I could see that its body had a very furry appearance to it. When it walked, I could see its arms sway and its knees bend with every step. I also noted a very pronounced crest on the top of its head and a very pronounced ridge in its brow line. I was on my back looking upstream and propped myself up on my elbows for a better look. As I did this, Greg, who was off to my left, propped himself up and said out loud, "What the hell is it?" I answered, not taking my eyes off the creature. "I don't know. Must be somebody ripping off cabins," implying a human form. Immediately upon Greg's words, the creature turned at the waist and looked at us, only taking its eyes off us to look at the other bank when it exited the river. When it looked at us, its face blacked out due to turning away from the moonlight. I remember hearing the creature cutting the water, which was about 3 feet deep, as it walked. The water flow was very fast, and no man could have crossed this area and remained standing for very long. The water came up to the creature's knees. I could see its knees bend as it lifted them to walk. It exited the river on the right side, and we lost sight of it. This sighting lasted only about 10 seconds, but lives vividly in my memory. The next morning, when Greg and I recalled what we had seen to the other guys, we were severely ridiculed. Because of this, we didn't really go back and check for tracks or other signs. We both agreed that what we saw was not human, and far too tall and massive to be a person or a bear. We both then agreed that it had to be a Bigfoot that we had seen. I do recall that the draw that the Bigfoot had come out of prior to entering the water was very dark, with thick brush and a spring-fed creek in it. As we were floating by, I remember having a very uneasy feeling about it as I was looking at it and would not have gone into it. I'm a Missouri resident. Back in 91 or 92, I can't remember which year, I was coming home and coming around a curve when I noticed eye shine. As I got closer, I could see a massive creature standing on the side of the road, reddish-brown color, at least 8 feet tall. As the truck lights hit this thing, it threw up its arm and covered its face. It was not a man in a suit or bear. When I say massive, I mean massive. This thing was anywhere between 600 to 800 pounds. As the years went by, I moved but within 7 miles from where I saw this creature the first time. I have been here 19 years now. Back in the first years, I would come home at night and hear things that I've never heard before, not thinking it was a Bigfoot, just not knowing what I was hearing, until one night about 2:30 in the morning, I let my little dog out and heard a holler that was long, and to me, sounded like a warning. I swooped my little dog up and ran in the house and shook. We have 119 acres, mostly wooded. My mother moved a trailer onto my land and was here for about 7 years before she passed away in 2010. She would call me and tell me something is hitting her door or trailer at night very hard. She also was throwing rocks out of the yard to keep her lawnmower from getting them, and to her surprise, 2 rocks came right back at her over her head. She never seen what threw them though. That also happened to me when I would be weed eating her yard. One time, she heard a pack of dogs running and barking. She went out to look, and she said all of a sudden, something firmly started talking in animal language to these dogs, and then she never heard the dogs again. She stated that if an 800-pound gorilla could talk, that's what it would sound like. Around the time, she started telling me things were hitting the trailer at night, and she was hearing walking around outside. Then, it started here at my house. Rocks hitting on the house. Rocks thrown on top of the house. It came up onto my porch. I heard it scuffle and run off as I was lying in bed. I knew whatever was just on my porch was extremely heavy. I have never been so petrified in all my life. Then, the wood knocks the very next night. My husband worked nights, so it was just my daughter and I at home. After my husband retired, he was working on my truck at our bottom barn, and as he pulled down there, he saw something that he said was not a man or a bear, but it ran so fast that he didn't know what it was. He said it was big and fast. After that, he started finding footprints. He would come and get me and show them to me. I heard this thing holler on several occasions, wood knocking and walking around outside. So much has happened throughout the years here, really way too much to document. I have noticed that it comes around if you sing. At the end of last summer, I bought a cheap little night vision scope. One night, I asked my husband, "You want to go sit out on the front porch with me?" He said okay, so we went out and took the night vision scope. I turned it on, started focusing it, and to my amazement, there it was in the woods, in the darkness, 50 yards in front of the house. As I was looking at this thing, I said, "Oh my, Henry, it's a Bigfoot." I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, right. But I handed him the night vision scope, pointed, and said, "It's standing right there." I waited a minute and asked, "Do you see it?" He said, "Yes, I see it." I said, "I told you there was a Bigfoot, and it was out there." This thing was standing there watching us as we were watching it. It was approximately 8 feet or taller, and huge. Its arms hung down past its knees, and kind of curved as like a monkey's would. Its head was crowned to some degree. We passed the scope back and forth to each other. My husband couldn't believe what he was seeing. I watched it crouch down and stand right back up. While we were watching that one, something other than it threw a rock on the carport. My big brave husband wanted to walk out to it. I told him it could rip him apart with little effort if it felt threatened. My husband started to walk out to it. There was a sudden flash of movement in the scope, and then it was gone. I couldn't see it anymore, so I hollered out, "I don't see it anymore, you better not go out there." But it was gone. It has never hurt or threatened us, besides growling at me. In total, I saw this creature 4 times, and only one is questionable. If I didn't see it with my own 2 eyes, I would be skeptical too, I suppose. My husband also has informed me that as he was walking the dog this morning, he heard a wood knock in one direction and a whistle in another. I heard the whistles the other night when I went out to see what the dog was raising Cain about. Alright guys, this is actually 1,000% true story that I haven't told anyone. The only person that's heard was my girlfriend's dad, as he was the first person we seen following this encounter. But, of course, he didn't believe us. I apologize for a few incorrect measurements regarding distance. My phone was in no service. I was terrified, and my anxiety was kicking in. It's hard to remember how long I was driving in distance, but it was at least 2 hours. Okay, now the story. I'm going to use our real names just because I don't feel like remembering artificial names while trying to remember a story I've tried so hard to forget. So, I'll give it to you raw and unedited. My name is Jimmy. I'm a 24-year-old male from Wisconsin. My girlfriend's name is Cassandra, and she too is a 24-year-old female from Wisconsin. At the time, we were both 23, so this happened in late August of 2017. At the time, I had a 2009 Mitsubishi Eclipse GT. This may be a factor in the good outcome from that night later on. So, after a rough summer in my hometown and endless problems it seemed, I had had enough. I was ready to pack up and go in an instant, and that's pretty much what I did. My girlfriend's father owns a 15-acre ranch out in Arizona in the middle of the desert, about 45 minutes southwest of Tucson. The ranch is in 3 Points, Arizona, pretty much 45 minutes north of the Mexican border. My girlfriend's father, Rick, and I are very much alike. We both enjoy extreme sports, fast cars, and gorgeous women. So a workday for us would fly by with the breeze like we're 2 buds kicking the hell on a weekend. So the idea of living there with him in full seclusion, surrounded by desert and my favorite terrain of all time, mountains, seemed like heaven compared to this shit city I call home. I kicked the idea to my girlfriend the same day, and I said, "Screw this," and she agreed. It was time for a change of scenery. I packed all of our valuable stuff, put it all into my tiny Mitsubishi, and hit the road 3 a.m. the next night. Mind you, I didn't even get paid for my job yet, but I said screw that, I can't be here any longer. I hit the road with about $300, my girlfriend, a car packed to the brim, and the faith I'll make it safely and without trouble. Lucky, being a car guy that's ran into problems before, prepared I would say, appropriately, and brought some tire pluggers just for the hell of it. Little did I know I would need them later on. The trip is going smoothly, and we're about 17 hours in. I'd already filled up 3 times, and that 300 turned to 200, on top of food stops as well. 13 more hours to go. I can't necessarily say what happened, but I was halfway through Texas, running low on money. After such a long ride, driving straight through music seemed like it was just messing with my head, opposed to helping me keep me aware and awake. So I turned it off. 15 minutes later, my tires make a weird hiss, and me and my steering wheel start resisting a bit. Luckily, there was an exit coming up 500 feet. I get off, observe my tire, and Lord behold, an industrial nail plug right in the tire near the edge. I got it out, plugged the tire, and put air in. Temporary success. I continued my journey, letting my girlfriend drive to try and close my eyes for a couple of hours. Mind you, we've been driving for about 21 hours at this point. I mean, I'm exhausted. We fill up again and continue. I close my eyes and wake up about an hour and a half later to still be in Texas. I'm thinking, hell, is this trip ever going to end? Getting kind of frustrated, feeling like my girl probably weighs 60 extra miles driving like a granny, I asked her to pull over and let me finish. I fill the tire up, top off the gas, and go. About 2 more hours pass, and New Mexico's border is up in the next 30 miles. After being surrounded in total darkness for hours, we make it to a giant gas station. Literally, that's the name of it, and we pull in. I have half a tank of gas, $15, and I'm tired as hell. We had 8 more hours ahead of us, and we really felt we weren't going to make it. So we decided to call her father. No answer. Another call. No answer. 3 more phone calls. No answer. So we text him and continue on our way. Before we departed the gas station on the border, we checked out our maps to get a good idea on how much longer we had to finish the trip. So there were 2 routes. A longer route that takes about an extra hour, cutting through smaller New Mexico cities, including Albuquerque, with just a small patch of desert to drive through. I noticed the detoured route was an hour shorter in time and a straight shot through the desert. My Apple Maps wouldn't load the route properly or let me use it for directions, so I restarted my phone. Still nothing. I had to download Google Maps just so I could use this route. Mind you, the way we chose to take, there were no city lights, no high population, just small stop and supply towns with 100 cars around, but not a soul to be found. The first hour was okay, besides it being pitch black, traveling on a 2-lane desert highway with only 20 feet on the road in front of you being visible. Nothing else. Not even my taillights can make anything up behind me. As I'm driving, headlights appear in the distance, and I'm thinking to myself, finally, another driver. I won't be on this road alone anymore. After 5 minutes, the truck finally catches up, and it's behind me, about 2 car lengths. Remember, I'm driving a small Mitsubishi Eclipse, full of a bunch of my belongings, and with my tire having issues, it was putting a bunch of weight on it, making it uncomfortable to drive going high speeds. So I'm going about 60 miles per hour, and I could tell this truck wanted off this road as much as I did, because they start passing me on the other side of the road, going about 90, flying past me. I'm big on cars, and I'm our shop's driver for our race team in South Arizona, so I know cars, and when it comes to speed, I'm usually spot on with it. I'm thinking in my head, man, I'm jealous. I just want to ditch all this stuff in my car and floor it with this guy. 20 minutes later, I'm proceeding on my route, and I see a huge semi coming up behind me. They never fully catch up, just close in the distance. I would say 500, 600 feet. I looked in my rear view. Still, nothing significant. I glued my eyes back to the road for another 3 minutes and check out my rear view again. Wait, he's gone. What? How didn't I see any roads to turn down? It's just been desert and one road. I say out loud to myself. Mind you, since we left the gas station on the border, my girlfriend has been sleeping like a newborn. I look over at her to tell her what I just saw, or didn't see, and I think, nah, I'm gonna let her sleep. I'll tell her later. As soon as I'm making my eyes back to the road, my phone internet data completely wiped out on me. I couldn't make a phone call, send a message, nothing. Luckily, Google Maps was still loaded, so I continued to follow the same route, when all of a sudden, a bright light came up behind me, in a distance probably a mile away, ground level. This light was so bright, but seemed so directed. It didn't illuminate anything around us, it was just pointed at my car, like headlights. I remember cussing, flipping my rearview mirror to reflect the lights. I assumed they had their brights on till I looked in my side view and realized how far the light actually was from me. I also said out loud, "Those are some bright lights, I need those," kinda joking to myself out loud. even though it was one of those diamond-shaped lights. I figure it just looks like that because it's far, and they're probably missing a headlight, so I didn't think much of it. Just chopping it up to it's probably the truck driver that disappeared earlier. I drive for 30 more seconds, and I look in my side view again. The light's closer and gaining on me extremely fast. Too fast to know that nobody was that interested in driving over 100 miles an hour in pitch black desert with only one headlight. I look down again. I look in the mirror. Okay, I got anxiety and I wake up my girlfriend. I tell her that what I've been seeing and asked her to check it out and make sure my eyes aren't messing with me from being so exhausted. She saw it too, and I don't know what it was when she looked at it, but after all I just told her, she looked, and the only thing she said when she turned back around from me was, "Drive faster." I floored it. With all my weight on the car and my low-pressure tire, I gunned it and got to about 100 miles an hour when I realized how unsafe the situation was. Then, I receded to about 75 miles an hour, just trying to keep my distance from this light. Then, it's gone. We have about 29 miles left till we get to another desert highway, going the direction we were headed, and despite all my potential problems about the strange light, is all I could think about. About 11 miles to go, and the light comes back, and out loud I look at my girlfriend and smile, and say, "Look, our friend's back," in a joking way, with a smirk on my face. At this time, though it just made me feel weird, I didn't really think too much of it, just how weird it was. This time, the light was closer, and I speed up again. It follows us for about 6 more miles and then goes again. We finally switch routes and stop in this old rundown town about 30 miles west of Roswell, New Mexico. I see the sign stating this, and in my head I say, "You gotta be kidding me," as my girlfriend and I are big on paranormal and take a huge interest in it, being a believer for the most part. I joked to my girlfriend about it and stated, "I knew it was an alien," and we both laughed. This town was so creepy. No gas stations, no lights, just cars on top of cars and no people. There was this old rundown motel that looked to be abandoned, but the only light around came from that light over the door of the motel. Also, let me state that I found that leaving this town, we were on the historic Route 666, now known as Route something old, but you'd never know it if you didn't care to look into it. Mind you, my phone is still out of service. I park and get out to try for a phone, after ringing the bell and knocking for about 5 minutes. I get back into the car and tell my girlfriend no luck, and we're just gonna have to continue on. Another 68 more miles to go till we make another turn. God, this is raising the roof on my anxiety. I don't know how I feel at this point. I just remember saying that I wanted this to be over. Low enough for my girlfriend to not make out what I said, but hear me mumble something. I said, "Oh, nothing," and just continued driving. When we pulled out of the motel, we drove past a parked semi off the road right next to the motel. As soon as we took off, this truck started right up and got on right behind us. I say, "That's weird. Why did he decide to leave when we left?" And my girlfriend says, "I don't want to find out. Drive faster." So he's following us for about 15 miles, and we come up to a 4-way cross intersection. I stop, and I'm like, alright, what's he gonna do? I pull over to the side of the road, and he goes past about his business. Instant relief. I felt, I'm not gonna lie. That was short-lived though, because immediately getting back on the road, I noticed the light once again came back, and we're on a different highway stretch. How? Why? As I'm telling my girlfriend it's back once again, I kid you not, this thing started elevating from the ground level to just over our car, where we could still see it trailing us in the mirror. But by this time, it was trailing us from an aerial position. I freaked. I released my expressed fear and floored it. It was that feeling when you know something's about to happen any second, but you're still trying to get ahead while you can. For those who play PUBG or Fortnite, you know when you're outside the battle circle and the storm circle is closing in on you, and you're trying to make it before the storm catches you, knowing it's coming faster than you can run, and you're expecting it to hit any second, but you don't stop for anything. Yeah, that's exactly how it felt, and I just knew something was about to happen to us that night. I was creeping up on a quarter tank of gas with a bum tire and an extra 10 hours of constant driving. I was mad, upset, scared, and determined, all simultaneously. I'm gonna be completely honest. I sat here for 30 minutes trying to remember what happened after all that, but I honestly can't. I really can't, and it's giving me a really sick and nauseous feeling. I remember the whole trip, up to a T, until that happened, and I remember being sad, highly irritable, and anxious for the next week. From that night, I just remember making it to a small gas station after that 69-mile stretch I just did. I talked to a local weird-looking guy, definitely somebody I'm not used to seeing. Rough, gritty-looking, brownish redhead, and wore some extremely thick opticals. I told him about our trip and what we saw in the desert, and that I don't really remember what happened after I saw it again. He chuckled and said, "You made it out, guys. They didn't keep you for long." I looked at my girlfriend, and we made awkward, nervous chuckles. You can tell we just did it to not be rude by laughing at what he seemed like a dark humored joke. I asked, "How much more desert do we have to drive through?" He says about 45 minutes before we run to our first big city, south of Albuquerque. I'm like, hell, but that's 45 minutes and seemed a lot better than another 2 hours. So I threw in my $15 and got back on the road. At this point, I knew we weren't going to make it back to Arizona with the amount of gas we had. At the blink of an eye, after we left the desert gas station in the middle of nowhere, my phone service cut back on to my relief and surprise. I instantly grabbed it and told my girlfriend, "Call your dad." She had just lost her phone before we had departed from Wisconsin, so we only had my phone. Her dad picked up and decided to meet us close to New Mexico, and we're heavy recreational smokers on top of work and sports. That's what we like to do to relax. All of our family knows it's her dad, so he had some medical grade ganja waiting for us when he met us. Telling him about our experience, he laughed about it and said, "You sure you guys didn't smoke before that happened?" We both laughed and said, "Hell no, we didn't," but didn't really take the whole thing seriously. After rolling up a nice joint and taking a few deep, satisfying hits from it, we were back on the road again and a few hours from our destination when I started to really think, what happened? How did we lose a whole hour and a half of time? As much as I believe in the paranormal, I'm still not convinced in the whole alien abduction thing, but that crossed my mind, and for the next week, I got all of these unusual random emotions, and my girlfriend and I had weird marks on our chest, wrist, ankles, and neck. Both of us. It was nerve-wracking, and smoking a little bit helped me uncover little details following that. Nothing added up. I don't know what happened that night, and I know some of the guys think that wasn't scary, or I want to know what happened. Well, if this was made up, I would have made it much more intense and crazy. But this is very true, and I want answers as much as some others might. If you guys, anybody has traveled in that area or stretch of freeway in the middle of the night and have experienced anything similar, please, I want to hear it. I can't be the only one to have this experience.